Got lucky enough to meet Don a couple of years back, and he then went on to become CEO of Basho Technologies, which is one of the leading NoSQL companies, and still going on and doing good things. And now he's got the great pleasure of being able to retire. And so when you see no logos and stuff on his slides, he's here representing himself, and out of the goodness of his heart flew in, and he's going to leave shortly thereafter to go to a family reunion. But I think this is going to be a wonderful 30 minutes of what I consider some of the best wisdom that can be around the cloud industry. So Don, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Andy. Thank you very much. Yeah, let me get on the presentation. You won't see a lot of logos here because I do have that good job now. So I'm going to go over a few things today, and I'm going to say, who is this guy? One topic that I've already heard said twice that I think comes from Rackspace, and it's very clever. It's everybody but not everything, and I'll get into that in a minute. Talk about supply-driven versus demand-driven cloud, the law of the jungle. Talk about let's talk dirty and the Holy Grail, and then I'll go through a few vendor strategies where I'll give you my opinion as an unemployed person as to what I think these vendors are doing. So you can expect that it will be fairly unbiased and fairly blunt. I think some are doing very well and some not so well at all. Who is this guy? Is me. I'm the chief slacker, one of Mitt Romney's 47%, who's busy living off the government. I am an independent consultant. I work about 20 hours a week. I have contracts with a bank, a big tech company, and a telecommunications company. So it's not quite completely unemployed, but it's nothing like the amount of hours I was working. I was formerly the CEO of Basho Technologies. For the last part of my long career at Accenture, I was the CTO of Accenture. I'm a patent holder of a patent about cloud technologies, and I have a patent pending around security in the cloud. And on a personal note, I'm the father of 5 sons. So anybody that wants to inquire about how to fix broken furniture, you've come to the right place. I can explain that, and I've fixed pretty much everything that can be fixed. And if you want to understand, I don't know who broke it and how to get through that, I'll help you with some of the interrogation techniques I've learned over the years. I broke a lot of furniture at work too, but not as much. Let's say, so it says what should go in the cloud? Everybody but not everything. Meaning every company, there's some aspect of the cloud that unless you're the CIA or the NSA, in which case you're reading other people's cloud data. But if you're a normal company, you're going to have something in the cloud because there's something in the cloud that makes sense for you to do in the cloud. You're not going to have everything in the cloud. So what are the workloads that are actually going in the cloud right now? This was from a combination of Everest and Rackspace. And it means there's some aspect of that in the cloud or going to the cloud at the research group of companies that answered the questions. Email and collaboration, how many people don't use WebEx or don't use GoToMeeting? Well, if you're using WebEx or GoToMeeting, no matter what your CIO says, you're in the cloud because that's how you use WebEx and GoToMeeting if you're not the DoD. Web applications, so your website, a lot of websites in the cloud. A lot of SFA in the cloud, and that should say just about Salesforce.com. And having been a user of Siebel at Accenture and a user of Salesforce.com at Basho, I was much happier with Salesforce.com, plain and simple. And I can see why they're making such great progress in Salesforce automation, CRM, etc. I think that's another example, just an example of a better application delivered in a better way that replaced what was in its day a great application that was delivered in the traditional way. And I think you'll see more and more of that. Industry-specific custom applications. This basically is a company that decides they need an application, they write it in the cloud, and they leave it in the cloud. E-commerce and business analytics. So if you look at these workloads, this is kind of the state of the art today. The question ought to be, will more move into the cloud? And I'll put forth a bit of the pessimistic view, maybe not. Maybe the cloud's steep growth curve is going to flatten out a bit. There are some real impediments, in my opinion. I'm speaking about the Global 2000 here rather than consumers in the cloud, which is a different matter, or even SMB in the cloud. There's some things that have to happen for that growth curve to keep going up at the speed it's been going up. And those things may happen, or they may not. But I think they will tell the tale, looking back 10 years from now, as to whether or not the cloud really achieved that Gartner-like prediction of great growth. And let's talk about a couple of those. The first is, in my opinion, the cloud to date has been a supply-driven market. 7 or 8 years ago, there weren't a lot of CIOs that I knew standing around yelling and screaming at various technology vendors that they needed a cloud. And why don't you have a cloud? They didn't know what a cloud was, and when they heard about it, they didn't like it all that much. So this wasn't a wellspring of demand from Global 2000 companies. It was more a series of decisions, particularly by Amazon, to offer some capabilities that they figured if they built it, they'll come. Well, they built it, and by and large, they came, so they were right about that. But the question is, how much can you continue to grow, and at what rate can you continue to grow if this is a supply-driven environment versus a demand-driven environment? And I think for this to continue to grow at the pace it's been growing and to continue to be as big as people think it will, it's going to have to become a demand-driven environment. And it's not quite a demand-driven environment just yet. I think it could be, but I don't think it is. So let's look at, how did Amazon roll out its products? And if you guys can see in the early years some rhyme or reason to which products came out first, second, third, and fourth, then your pattern recognition skills are way ahead of mine. Because I'll tell you what I think I see, and I know Werner Vogels, and he's a great guy, he's a genius. He's an icon of the technology market. And I think he went through and just said, hey, I wonder what I can spring loose first. And he decided he could spring loose Object Store first. So S3 was the first product that they offered in 2006. Then he said, I could probably get queuing available. So Simple Queue Services was the second product. From there, compute made sense. A simple database, content management, elastic block, a mountable volume that you can put a relational database on, a virtual private cloud. It's almost like 2009, the experiment had enough success behind it that it got to be pretty serious. It went from being sort of a, what do we have in our own infrastructure that we can let others use and charge them for it because we happen to have it anyway, and why not pocket money if we can, to a more methodical, hey, we better figure out how we can sell CloudWatch. We better figure out how to do automatic scaling. We better figure out how to do load balancing. And by the way, there's this MapReduce thing that if we could figure out how to sell that, people would buy it. So to me, when I look at Amazon, they began to get a little more methodical around 2009. Fast forward, and there are a lot of releases in here I don't mention. I just pick some because I think they illustrate the point. And there are a lot of improvements that they've done that aren't on this chart. You get to 2012 and 2013, and you're seeing something remarkably different from Amazon. These aren't point solution products anymore. These are not, good, cost-effective, high-scale things. These are sophisticated software products. In fact, these are extremely sophisticated software products. And I'd say today, anybody that said that they wanted to list the 5 top software companies in the world better have Amazon on that list, because they are, in my mind, absolutely one of the 5 best software companies in the world. And if people like HP and IBM aren't thinking that way, then I think HP and IBM are in for a very rude surprise. DynamoDB was written by Amazon. It is a fully scalable, fully distributed NoSQL database. The company I ran, Basho, had a database like that, so I'm down on the details with what they did with DynamoDB. They did something we couldn't do because they have a cloud and we don't. We didn't. They took that database and configured it with SSD storage so that you not only request access to that database and the database's functionality, you pay by the amount of throughput you get back. That's pretty clever work there. In fact, that's brilliant work. Now, I'm not just paying for functionality, I'm paying for how fast that database processes, and if I want to process more with lower latency, I pay more. I can buy reduced latency without engineering it. Very, very, very ingenious in my opinion. Glacier is their long-term storage. It uses something called erasure coding. Very complicated method of compressing data. And it compresses data about a half the volume if you use erasure coding, but erasure coding's slow. You have to undo the erasure coding when you want to bring the archive data back. So the guys at Amazon, again, wrote it themselves. And they wrote an erasure-coded archival capability that they'll tell you, look, you can put stuff there and you'll get it back, but it may take a while to get it back. Here's the deal, though. It's about a tenth the price you'd pay to do it yourself. Pretty clever. And I can tell you, knowing the database world pretty well, that's a very sophisticated product. That is not a basic product. It's not Zen on some cheap processor. That's a very complicated product. And then finally, Redshift is miraculous. And here's where I'd argue with those that say that the cloud really isn't cheaper than working in your own environment. There are cases where that's true. If you've got a server that's burning away 23 hours a day in your environment and you go lease that same capability with EC2, you're paying more for EC2. I guarantee it. But if you get into Redshift, which is it's kind of a Hadoop-like capability. It's an environment or a platform that lets you put a lot of data into the database and then go do queries against that data. But here's what they did. They took PAR Excel, they took Postgres, they merged them together on their own infrastructure, and the queries you write in Redshift are written in SQL. They're not written in Hive. They're not written in Hadoop-specific languages. So it's a big step forward. I've seen benchmarks, and Amazon touts that it's 10 times faster and costs 1/10 as much as storing and querying the same amount of data in a Hadoop cluster. I'm sure they're pushing the envelope with some of those claims, but in the case of Redshift, I don't think you could possibly do it as cheaply as they're doing it behind your firewall. So they've migrated from pretty straightforward stuff that I believe, I don't know, but I believe, was part of their retail infrastructure to far more sophisticated things that are now getting to the point of being almost application or platform-like. And so I'd watch for more of that from those guys. And I think if you want to, the law of the jungle, which I put on the agenda, was if you want to understand the jungle, you got to go to the Amazon. You got to watch what these guys are doing. I'm not saying that they win the war. I'm not saying that they put everybody out of business. But I'm saying at this point in time, if you want to see the state of the art's happening with Amazon Web Services. The state of the art in SaaS, I think, is happening with Salesforce and Workday. But paying attention to Amazon's worth your time. Just what they're doing and why they're doing it. The Let's Talk Dirty is data-intensive real-time applications. And I'll give the jargon alert to, I believe it was Joyent. It was Joyent or Voxer that coined this. It wasn't me. I wish I could take credit for it. And these are the apps everybody's talking about. These are the things that are supposedly going to put the volume on the cloud. These are the things that can't be done unless you have a distributed database, that can't be done unless you have access to immense amounts of highly virtualized compute environments. This is that supermarket example Paul Merritt's always talks about. So Paul, who I have great respect for as well, the former CEO of VMware, presently the CEO of Pivotal at the EMC companies, says, well, the worst problem about a supermarket is that the company doesn't touch the buyer until they get ready to check out. And by that time, they've made all their purchasing decisions. And so it's really an ineffective business model to let me walk into a supermarket, wander around on my own, pick out what I want, miss the things they want me to buy but don't see, and then the first time they say hi to me is when I'm putting the stuff up to pay for it. And his belief is that you could have a capability where by using things like infrared, video recognition, et cetera, you might not see who was where, but you can see how many are where. You could alert people with discounts. You could offer them a discount on one thing because they're going to buy something else that's a higher margin product. You could, while people are in the market shopping, change their behavior by looking at the real-time data of what you've got in stock, of what they normally buy, of what they've bought already today, et cetera, et cetera. This is the theory behind a data-intensive real-time application. No one's doing it, but it's a good theory. People talk about being able to do kind of the same thing with toll roads, and this is one where it actually is being done. If you go down to Washington, D.C. right now and you get on the Beltway, you're going to be sitting in traffic. You'll be sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. You look over there, and there's a road where there's not too much traffic. Well, it's a hot lane, high occupancy vehicle lane, only you can go in it by yourself if you pay the extra toll. The toll varies depending on how much traffic there is. And once you enter that road, the toll can't change for you until you exit the road. So they're constantly looking at the number of cars. They're tracking how fast the cars are going. By law, the company that runs this Fluor and Transurban have to maintain a minimum speed limit while they're taking tolls. That's a data-intensive real-time application. It'd be very hard to do in a traditional architecture. It'd be very hard to do with a classic client-server app. It really is a distributed problem. There are too many cars. They're entering and exiting too often. There's too much real-time data. And by regulation, they pay a pretty stiff penalty if they mess up. They've got to get it right. Another case where you really can't build that application in the traditional data center architecture. Now, if you can rebuild what Amazon did, including all the software, including DynamoDB, including Elastic Load Balancer, if you can rebuild all that in your data center, then I'd say, yeah, you can do that. I challenge how many normal companies, meaning other than Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, really could do that. It's an extremely high bar to put together the products that Amazon's put together, or that Rackspace has put together. Amazon's certainly not the only people involved. So the big question is, are these dirty apps, are these complicated applications that do data-intensive real-time processing, are they really going to happen? Is there a real business case for that? Here's the alternative to a dirty app in the supermarket. It's my Safeway card. And I walk up with the cashier and I hand him my Safeway card and he takes it and pops it in and I get a discount. This is the alternative to that complicated supermarket app I was talking about. Is there a business case to replace this 12-cent card with all that sophisticated technology in a low-margin business like a grocery store? I don't know. There might be. There might not be. But I'm not yet. IBM talks about farm to fork. They're going to track every piece of food from the point it's raised on a farm all the way to the point that you put it on a fork and eat it. Why? Is there a business case for that? And right now I'm hearing a lot of talk about applications that sound brilliant, sound ingenious, sound like fun. I'd love to build them. I don't know if enterprise is really going to do it. And a lot of that theory as to why there's going to be so much volume in the cloud comes from the idea that there are going to be these large and sophisticated data-intensive real-time applications. You'll hear it called wide applications as opposed to narrow applications. But at this moment in time, I'm not sure I'm seeing a lot of them get built. Now, I hope they do, and I think they should. You should be able to know where your bag is. Your bag at the airport is getting scanned every time it goes through one of those readers. Why do you wonder where your bag is? The airline knows where your bag is. They just don't tell you. Seems like they should tell you. You know it's going to take 10 minutes, go get a cup of coffee. If it's 1 minute, if it's 30 seconds around the corner, just stand there. My boat, I have a Blue Water, 25-foot center console. It's got 2 Evinrude 200 motors on the back. Love that boat. That boat has all kinds of information. I don't get it. I have to take it to the Tillman Island Marina, and a guy named Johnny comes down. Johnny's got a laptop, and Johnny takes the cowling off the 2 Evinrudes. He puts the wires on, and now Johnny can get the information. Come on, Evinrude. Let me know what's going on. Let me know that my kids were running the thing at 52 knots. I really do need to know that. That's just not safe anywhere. So it's, you know, I can see why there's reasons where companies would do it, but I'm not seeing a lot of companies actually doing it, even though in many cases they're pretty close. And the data's there, they don't seem to see the business case for it. So I hope they do, but if they don't, you're not going to see that curve. You may still see a growth in cloud, but you're not going to see the exponential curve that a lot of people have been predicting. And I blame the systems integrators. I blame the guys at Accenture and IBM and Deloitte for not building prototypical applications like this. They should have these things out running in prototype right now as an effort to sell more of them, as an effort to prove it's possible, as an effort to show what the business cases are. And the fact it's not being done is disappointing to me, frankly. But the big one, this is not just the Holy Grail, this is the Holy Grail in the cloud. The big one is a belief that if there were enough sophisticated services exposed as consumable APIs in various clouds around the world, that you could begin to develop applications by connecting those services together through some type of a case tool, and you would much more quickly build business applications than you've ever been able to build them before. Now, those services aren't very useful if they're not elastic. A service that runs slowly as you put more volume on it isn't much good when people keep putting more volume on it. Twitter's API, so a consumer service, Twitter's API is executed 13 billion times a day. you don't execute an API 13 billion times a day in a traditional architecture. You don't execute an API 13 billion times a day with a monolithic database. You don't do it cost effectively on a SAN. You just don't. It's not possible. So if you want to get to that point where you're at that level of web scale, then you've got to use a cloud architecture. Whether it's behind your firewall or not, I'd say it's pretty hard to get done behind your firewall, but maybe. Why would you want to do that? Well, because you want to offer software for people to use that you're going to expose as an API. And I'll give you a couple of companies, small companies, who I think are pushing the envelope on this one. And if this one hits, that's it. Game, set, match. I can't imagine many companies still having substantial data center assets of their own, if this one hits. One would be Orchestrate.io. My former development lead from Basho and COO from Basho started this company. Queries as a service. Don't worry about the underlying database. They'll do the translation. You tell them what data to get, and they'll go get it. Early days for these guys, $3 million of seed funding. Brilliant idea. I'm not an investor. It's not a personal thing to me, other than I know these guys are good. Cumulogic, a PaaS company that's making it a lot easier to get some of the functionality that an Amazon does on top of your firewall, on top of your data center behind the firewall. Excellent company. I'd keep an eye on them. I think, I know Andy feels that PaaS is probably a bit of a way off. I think these guys are making fast progress, and I think you ought to talk to them just to get a gauge of where they are. They're getting quite a lot of interest, particularly from the telcos. So I think they're doing very well. And these are the kind of companies that I think are making progress in this space. I'd say on a larger scale, Informatica's MDM in the cloud. If you had that, you could do this. If you can do this, there's going to be a whole lot of volume in the cloud. Because I'm not going to put my service behind 5,000 firewalls. No. You're going to come to me, and you're going to use my service. I'm not going to distribute it because then I get killed on the cost. It costs way too much for me to get it behind your firewall. You need to connect to me. You need to join with me and use my service behind my firewall, and that's a cloud. So you start seeing those kinds of things start to happen. If you begin to see applications actually built this way, and I don't even think there's a good term for this. The other one's Apigee. I would very much keep an eye on Apigee. Apigee's API GEE, again, I'm not an investor. A good friend of mine is one of the founders. Brilliant work on API management. They're making this happen for companies. So if you want to expose your own data like the Weather Channel does, then Apigee has the software that lets you take data behind your firewall and turn you into a cloud that your customers can use. So who uses Weather Channel data? Well, insurance companies do. Because if you're insured by, I think it's Allstate, and there's a hailstorm coming through your area, you're going to get a text message from Allstate saying, get your car in a garage. Don't let your car out. There's a hailstorm coming. You don't get your car bagged up. Allstate doesn't pay the claim. Allstate pays the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel has the data and the predictive analytics. They access it as a service. I think you see more and more of that. But you got to have to see a lot of it to see these Gartner-like growth numbers. And then finally, the kind of the vendor strategies. And I say more than I'll write, even though I know it's being recorded. Let's talk about who's doing well. Intuit is doing well. Intuit has embraced the cloud, I think, extremely successfully. They're an SMB-focused company. But if you want to see a successful business strategy of an existing company in the cloud, I'd take a long look at Intuit. I think EMC is on the verge. I think what Paul Maritz is trying to do with Pivotal is going to be a huge success if those dirty apps and if those composite development approaches come to fruition. If they don't, it's going to be a mistake. I think they will. He thinks they will. I like their strategy. I like their acquisitions. I like the combination of assets they've got. They seem like they're doing pretty well. I see some companies like Teradata, I don't know if they have a cloud strategy. And given what Amazon's doing with Redshift, I think they need to come up with one. Now, maybe I just don't understand their strategy. I'm not an insider there, and I just read what I can find on the internet, but I don't see where they're going with it. I'm not sure I see where Infor is going. I mean, they have a $500 million API or user interface cleanup. Well, guys, that's like 1995 thinking, right? Nowadays, you got to get your application re-architected. SAP is kind of in the middle. They're trying. They got HANA on the brain. Everything's HANA, HANA, HANA. It's like that Brady Bunch, was it Marsha, Marsha, Marsha? Every time I hear HANA, I think of that. It's like HANA's not the be-all and end-all. It's a nice product, an in-core and in-memory relational database. But guys, that's a start. You know, it's a part of it. It's an interesting idea. It isn't really fully onto the cloud-based architecture. So they're doing things. IBM might have put in the middle till they bought SoftLayer. All right. Apparently something clicked. And, you know, we'll see if it turns out well or badly, but at least it shows an aggressiveness that I hadn't seen really before around the cloud. The telcos, boy, oh boy. I worked for them at Accenture for a long time. They have all the pieces, as always, to do amazing things. You tell me how Akamai exists instead of the telcos having come up with that CDN. Come on. So the question isn't whether they have the capital, and the question isn't whether they have the pieces. The question is whether they'll execute and pull it together before they get overwhelmed in that space. And I just don't know. I hope they do. I think the more competitors, the better for the market, the better for the customers. But I don't know that they'll be able to. They missed it with content distribution networks. I mean, AT&T got one up and going 4 or 5 years late, but better than anyone else of the telcos who didn't really get anything going. You know, they obviously hit it with wireless. They saw that one pretty clearly and executed very well on it. So we'll see what they do with cloud. You've got, you know, CenturyLink owning Savvis. You've got AT&T owning US Internetworking. You've got Verizon owning Terramark and Digex from their MCI acquisition. So the pieces are there. Do they have the software depth? Maybe. They're going to have to work on that. These skills are hard to find. You heard that Fair Isaac's moving to the West Coast. There's plenty of talent in Minneapolis. I was digging up for talent left and right at Basho. There just isn't the volume, I guess. And really the top guys in this, top women, men in this business are in the West Coast. I'm from the East Coast, so it's not a personal thing to me. It just is, it is what it is. So that's kind of how I see it. You know, to wrap it up, I'd say that you see the workloads in the cloud now that make sense and are going to continue to make sense. I don't see a lot of new work. I don't see people decommissioning their ERP system because they want to have an ERP system in the cloud. It cost them $200 million to get that last ERP system up and running. It's hard for me to imagine that unless it becomes a case where I can mix and match pieces, particularly if some of those pieces are relevant to my industry. And that would be the dirty applications kind of idea. I don't see a lot of people doing that mix and matching yet. I see the beginnings of it. I think it will come, but I believe it'll take longer than people are expecting. So I do expect to see the Global 2000 heavily in the cloud. I think the growth curve is going to be flatter than most of the curves you're looking at right now. I think decommissioning existing applications is really, really painful. There has to be a huge business reason to do it. So the first supermarket that starts kicking everybody's butt with infrared tracking of customers and cell phone alerts of specials, all right, maybe that'll break the wall down. But until something like that starts to happen, you know, I don't know. It'll occur over time. I don't think there'll be a mad rush to get the core systems of record into the cloud. So I don't know if I have any time. That was probably
I
about
will
right.
make sure there's time for questions. First, let's call.
Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
So I have one, but anyone from the audience first? All right, from the back. Pardon me.
Great presentation. Don't you think it's more likely that enterprises, instead of taking their traditional workloads and trying to kind of fork load those up into the cloud, are just simply going to transition to SaaS-based cloud applications and next generation of applications? So eventually, you know, they won't have to try to you know, squeeze the square peg into the round hole. They'll just transition straight to SaaS.
No, I completely agree with that. So if you talk about the Holy Grail in the cloud, what that really is are a series of SaaS-based applications from different vendors. I don't see any one doing it, that can somehow be integrated enough that you get relatively decent performance and that you get, more importantly, the data integration below it. So I just don't see an SAP in the cloud. I see a logistics in the cloud, an HR in the cloud, a CRM in the cloud. I don't think there's this monolith that's in the cloud. So I wouldn't move my SAP application to the cloud. I'm not sure why I would do that. I'm not sure I'd save much money because I'm running it pretty hot probably anyway. But no, once I can start picking and matching, like you say, one SaaS after one SaaS, yeah, I think that is the way it goes. But I think that takes a while. That's all I'm saying. And that's kind of my holy grail in the cloud.
Excellent. Right over here, Don.
Do you think that healthcare might be the business case for the dirty app concept?
I do, mostly because it's so horrible now. You know, there's a couple that are just, somehow the automation wave missed them. Truck brokerages. A truck brokerage is a guy in Chattanooga, Tennessee, sitting in a dusty office with a yellow pad of paper on the telephone. Well, that shouldn't be how you get freight on a truck that's rolling empty from Atlanta to Knoxville. I mean, there should be a more automated way than that. Medicine's another one. It's been almost a cottage industry. You know, your doctor has your files written in paper in one of those big rooms that every doctor has with a bunch of manila files on it. I absolutely think that that could be a dirty app. It also, there's a lot of calibration. You get the activity monitors, the sleep monitors. There's a lot of data that could be collected. People take their health seriously particularly when there's something going a little bit wrong, or as you get a little bit older. So I think healthcare is perfect for that. And you know, people, you don't like Obamacare, but something had to happen. Maybe it isn't perfect, but we weren't going the right path that we were on. And he's got a lot of pressure. The Affordable Care Act has a lot of pressure on doctors to automate. You just don't get paid as much if you don't. So it's going to happen. And I think healthcare is almost a perfect place for that dirty app to occur. Logistics ought to be a perfect place. I mean, there's reasons you want RFID tags and to track the equipment. There are things you should see that sort out, but RFID is one of those areas that never quite got to its potential. So you think to yourself, well, maybe the business case really just isn't there, you know. And GE's an investor in Pivotal. I thought that was telling. You know, why does GE want to be an investor in Pivotal? I think they see a kind of an Internet of Things possibility, and they want to have a stake in that technology company along with EMC and VMware. So I do see some industries where it should happen. I thought it might have happened by now in a few of them, and it hasn't. So obviously I was overly optimistic about how quickly this is going to happen, although I think it will.
I have one last one. I'll say that to Mike, and then we'll move on. McKinsey in 2009 did a study on an IT organization, one of the biggest financial banks, they didn't say explicitly which, that 1,800 full-time employees in IT. And they said if they did simulations to say if all the workloads moved over to one of the clouds, they could save 15% in labor cost. I don't know whether you think that that was appropriate at the time, whether it's bigger, whether it's smaller, but what's your comments on the overall IT savings for the ones that do embrace?
For a bank, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, first, they write a lot of their own applications, especially the big banks. So I don't know how efficient they are. They don't have the thousands of customers that an SAP has to kind of get the greatest operational efficiency. They're non-standard. It's hard to train people to operate them. 15% seems modest to me, but banks, you know, there's where I live down in Virginia, they have those bumper stickers that say, you can have my gun when you pry it from my cold dead hands. I feel like bank CIOs say that you can have my data center when you pry it from my cold dead hands. They just don't want to give up that facility, and they have lots of reasons around security, et cetera. But do you do your personal banking? Do you write checks with a pen, or do you pay your bills with a website? Mostly with the website. All right, so you got your money in the cloud. I mean, it's in some cloud, you know. So you're supposed to trust the bank, but the bank shouldn't trust Amazon, I guess. I don't know. I think there's a little pride of ownership around those data centers at the bank. There's some legitimate reasons they need to keep them too, but I'm not surprised at all at 15%. In a bank, big bank, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Well, I think you can see why I was so excited to have him be a part of this. Don, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yes. The videos. Thank you for being a part of the inaugural Big Cloud event in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll see you next year in March. To all of you, thank you. To our sponsors, thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.